Now, before you buy a house, you buy the location. Now, there are some problems with the house that I can help you finance. There's some problems that you can renovate. You can replace a roof. You can replace an HVAC system. You can redo the kitchen. You can knock down a wall. You can even completely change how the property looks. But there are some things about a property that no amount of money or financing or renovation is going to fix. And these things I want to walk with you today and talk with you about, because the biggest mistakes I see not only home buyers make, but investors make is falling in love with the house before they truly even understand what they're actually buying. Now, you have to understand, you're not just buying 4 walls and a roof. You're buying the street. You're buying the neighborhood. You're buying the properties around you. You're buying the traffic and the noise. You're buying the backyard that's behind you. And eventually, you're going to be asking this question: who is going to take the property when I'm ready to sell it? Even if you plan on keeping it forever, maybe your kids are going to have to ask that question. Who is going to take this property off our hands? And I think this is where some people get in trouble. Well, welcome back to the show. Today, we're going to be talking about something that can save you tremendous amount of money if you're buying a home or investing in real estate. And interesting enough, most people of what I'm going to talk about today has nothing to do with the interest rate, has nothing to do with the loan program, and very little to do with what a kitchen looks like. We're talking about the location problems and the property characteristics that can make a seemingly great deal a bad investment. Now, recently I've been working with an investor, and he was purchasing a townhome. And in that townhome, it was in this little small community in Florida. And funny enough, we had to get an inspection. And through that inspection, he found a lot of issues with the property. And this property was supposed to be a very easy DSCR deal. It was just cosmetic. And come to find out, it needed a roof. There was a lot of issues. There was leaking inside of the house, which could have caused mold and all these things that, luckily enough, he was able to, avoid this property, because it just, as the deal went on, we were almost at the finish line, and for some reason, it just wasn't going to work out. So the first thing I want you to think about is you can always change a house, but you can't change the street. What do I mean? Now, this is where people get caught. They walk inside of a house. They see this beautiful kitchen, granite countertops, nice flooring, a huge primary bedroom. There's, baths all over the place, and it could be completely renovated, and immediately they start picturing themselves living there. Or if you're an investor, you start calculating the rents and but what I want you to do before you ever even get emotionally invested with the property is I want you to stand outside. I want you to stand in front of the house. I want you to look to your left. I want to look to your right. I want you to look across the street. I want to look behind the house. And here's what I need you to ask yourself. If this house were completely empty inside, would this still be a location that I want? Now, that's a completely different question, because the kitchen can be remodeled, but the neighborhood characteristics usually can't. So number 2, I want you to be careful with busy roads. One of the biggest examples is a property sitting directly across a busy road. And here's where buyers get tempted. The house is usually cheaper. It usually has more square footage. Typically, there's this huge backyard, and they start telling themselves, I can live with this traffic, right? You look at their wife and say, I can live with this traffic. Our tenants are going to be okay. But the better question is, will the next buyer who'll be living in this property, are they going to be okay with it? Because homes with high traffic roads generally have a smaller pool of buyers because of the issues such as, traffic noise and privacy. Sometimes it's even safety concerns. That can affect both not only the marketability to resell the property, but also the value relative to the comparable properties in quieter areas, right? So, if you're an investor, or if you are buying it for yourself, you have to think about, is this going to be for a family? What are they going to think about if they have small kids? They might cross, this off immediately because it's a busy street, right? Some people want peace and quiet, but all that would be gone. Someone that's worried about pulling out of their driveway every morning gone. They don't even think about it. Like, or if they have pets, like gone. We live in Florida and we live in this development, but off this busy road, school just started. So my wife, is standing to trying to go left, onto this road. And she said it took her like 10 or 15 minutes. So imagine if our house was on that. That'd be crazy. So, you have to think about the busyness and the structure of where it's located, because it could potentially detract future buyers or future tenants. So number 3, I want you to look behind the house. Now, another thing that people don't do enough is they don't walk the backyard and they don't look at the backyard. But what I want you to do is look past it, right? What does the property back up to? Is it the major road? Is it an apartment complex? Is there a shopping center, a school, hospital, a commercial building, church parking lot? Is it undeveloped? The last one, actually is particularly interesting, right? So we have this undeveloped land that backs up into a woods, and these people are thinking like, wow, this is amazing. Nobody can ever build here. But you got to be careful because you honestly don't know that unless you've done some research about who owns the land, how it's zoned. You really are just making assumptions because today there might be trees, but 5 years from now, there could be, a 200 unit apartment building in your backyard. Now, my parents just recently bought a house in Florida, and there's this, their property backs up to some woods, and in their woods, there's actually a bald eagle's nest, right? So the realtor was saying, hey, this land is protected because, you have this bald eagle nest up there. But the truth, how do we know, right? I don't know that. And maybe the realtor is right. Maybe he's wrong. I have no idea. But you have to do your own investigation about what's going on around the property, because one day it looks one way and another day it's going to look another. So that's super important. And number 4 is you don't buy the most expensive house on the block. Now, here's another principle that investors and homeowners, like I try to get them to understand this, but you generally don't want to buy the property that's dramatically more expensive than everything else surrounding it. Now, this happens a lot with new construction. Now, why? Because, the real estate values, they're not in a vacuum, right? It's not going to suck up all of the, your property value is not going to suck up everyone else's value, but, the appraiser, the future buyer, and the lender, they're all going to look at comparables in the area, like what properties are comparable to this. Now, if you bought a house, and all the houses are around you, you paid $700,000 for a house, but all the houses around them are $300,000. You kind of created a problem. The house might actually have $700,000 worth of construction in it, but that doesn't mean the market is going to push that value up to $700,000. And this is why I tell investors, don't get confused what you spend with what something is worth, right? The numbers aren't always the same. You might put the most expensive granite countertops. You might put the most expensive stuff rehabbing it. That doesn't mean it's always going to push the value. It's going to look at the comparables around it. And sometimes just because you have the nicest house on the block doesn't mean it's going to be worth significantly more because you have the nice stuff inside. So, buying a solid property in a neighborhood where, surrounding values can pull yours upwards is always the best option. So number 5, what I want you to look at is watch for flood risks. Now, I currently live in Florida. I've recently worked with a buyer who was buying a condo on a, 30-store building. It's 30 stores on the up in the air, but it still needs flood insurance because the area is flooding. Now, that doesn't mean the flood is going to go 300 feet up in the air. Hopefully it doesn't. But because of the surrounding areas, we experience, hurricanes, we experience heavy rain, and there's flooding. And a house can look perfect on a beautiful sunny Sunday afternoon, but that doesn't tell you what's going to happen if it rains for 3 days straight. So make sure that when you're looking at things like high-risk FEMA flood zones, they definitely can affect your insurance requirements, your ownership costs go up. And if you're a buyer, you should investigate both the property's flood zoning and its actual flood history, rather than just assuming the absence of visible water, that no problems are going to be causing you risk. So some of the things you want to ask yourself, has the property ever been flooded? Does the street flood? What does the neighborhood houses look like? What does insurance cost? What is the insurance? Some people tend to forget maybe your house doesn't flood, but what happens if the road floods leading up to the house? That's still a problem. All right. So the next thing I want you to think about, number 6, is be careful with beautiful renovations. Now, there's one thing that investors, they get it all the time, right? You walk into a renovated property, everything looks beautiful, new flooring, new cabinets, new paint, new appliances, beautiful bathrooms. And psychologically, you start thinking, wow, everything's new. This is beautiful. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, right? Because everything you might see is new, but the difference is, the question you should be asking yourself is, what's behind the walls, right? What's the plumbing, the electrical? How's the foundation? How's the roof? What is the drainage, the HVAC? These things have all been fixed, but are there any permits to it? So you have to know that, when you buy something, a property shouldn't just be based on, nice countertops and paint. Cosmetic renovations are easy. That's the easy part. The expensive stuff is often the stuff you don't see. So especially with the flip, you need to find out who did the work, was it permitted, and was it inspected? And one thing you definitely don't want to forget is you have to do your due diligence. Don't waive an inspection. So you're about to invest hundreds of thousands of dollars. You don't want to waive a $500 or $700 inspection because it's going to reveal some of the issues that's going on. So that doesn't make no sense. Like talking about the deal I had in Florida, the guy's buying a townhome. And again, it was just supposed to be an easy deal. We'll call it a DSCR loan. You put X percentage down, just paint and new flooring, new carpet, all of that should have taken care of it. But the inspection revealed way more. We had to turn the DSCR into a rehab loan. So now, they has to put all these rehab money, and now the deal's not looking good, right? Because you got to put more money into it to get it up to speed. Market rents, you got to think about comparables. And this is an investor. He wants to make money on it. Is he going to be able to make money? It's going to be hard when, he's buying it at a certain price. That price didn't change because it was a rehab. Well, the inspection showed us like, hey, look, there's all these things that need to be fixed. So it doesn't make sense to waive inspection. If for any reason the seller wants you to waive it, buyer beware. All right, number 7, visit the property more than once. Now, this is one of my favorite tips because if you're truly considering buying a house or an investment property, you just don't want to visit at the showing, right? You want to go back, go in the morning, in the afternoon, go at night, even go on the weekends, because a neighborhood, they have different personalities when it comes to different times of the day, right? Some places are definitely going to be peaceful at 11 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, but it might look different when it comes 5:30. Maybe, you're on a commuter shortcut. Maybe everyone parks their car on the street at night. Maybe a business nearby creates a lot of traffic, or you notice a lot of, dogs barking at night. Maybe the neighborhood, they throw parties on the weekend. I have a neighbor across the street, and across the street, she's like every weekend, she's inviting everybody she knows. And it's loud, so that is something we wouldn't have known, or we didn't know. And along with that, everybody parks on the street. So as we're navigating our, to our house, man, I'm always like, don't want to hit another car. I got to pull over to the side to let someone go by. And that could be annoying, right? So you just have to be prepared and understand what you're getting into. And it's not, it's important to visit it multiple times during the day, multiple times, different days, especially on the weekends, to see what's going on. So just don't spend, an hour looking at it and think you can make a decision from there. So number 8, let's talk to the neighbors. Here's something people don't underestimate. Knock on a door, talk to somebody. You need to interrogate them, right? You don't have to get too crazy, but you just have to ask them, yeah, hey, what do we're thinking about buying this property. What do you like about the neighborhood? And then don't talk. Stay quiet. And you'll be amazed what people are going to tell you. They're like, oh, we love it here. Things are great. Or it's great except when it rains. Now you can listen in Tell me a little bit more. What happens when it rains? Well, the whole street floods. Well, that's important to know before you close, right? Not after you close. Your real estate agent, they know a lot. The inspector is going to know a lot. The lender is going to know a lot. But the person who has lived there for 17 years is probably going to know a lot of things that they don't know. So make sure you talk to them. So number 9, investors need to think differently, right? So now that you looked at the house, and this is going to be specifically for investors, right? They come to me and say, Michael, I really don't care what's going on. I'm not going to live there. And that's fine. You're not going to live there, but someone is going to live there. It's going to be your tenant, right? And eventually someone else may own it, right? You're going to sell this thing. You might keep it for a long time, but there might be a point where you need to sell it, and it needs to still be marketable, right? So when you're looking at investment, there's some things you need to know, like who's going to be my tenant? Who's going to be my future buyer? What is my exit strategy? And that's especially important, especially if you're looking at a DSCR loan or bridge financing for a fix and flip or private money or any other, investment loan. Getting financing doesn't make something a good investment. Financing is a tool. Now, a loan can help you buy a great deal, but it also can help you buy a terrible deal. Now, the lender is going to do their own due diligence. They're going to make sure that, you're buying it for the right price, right? So they're not over leveraging you. They're going to look at the market rents to make sure that the rent is going to cover the mortgage and the taxes and insurance and HOA and all these bills. They're going to look at all that. They're going to do their due diligence. But that's kind of where it ends for them, right? They say, hey, this property is, because it's all about risk, right? There's going to either be a lot of risk or a little risk, but they're going to make sure that, they're able to get their money back. But that doesn't mean that it's a good buy, because let's talk about number 10, right? Your exit strategy starts before you even buy it. So one of the most important things that I've learned about real estate is this: your exit strategy, it doesn't start when you sell, but it actually starts when you buy. Before you even purchase anything, I want to know, if I had to sell this property in 6 months, who's going to buy it from me? If the market slows down, will people still want to be in this location? If rents drop, right, does the deal still make sense? Will the bills still be covered? If the rates are higher when I sell, is the property attractive enough to still compete? Because anybody can look smart in a hot market, right? You can look good. You can, when things are selling in 3 days, mistakes can get hidden. It's when the market gets harder is when you find out what you actually bought is a good deal or a bad deal. So the bigger lessons here is this whole episode really comes down to, don't be focused on getting a deal that you forget to ask yourself whether it's a good deal. Those are different things. I see a lot of people do this all the time. They finally get pre-approved. They've been searching for months. They've lost 3 other offers. They're frustrated. And then this house comes along. And because they're exhausted, they're making excuses for things that they would have rejected 6 months ago. The traffic isn't that bad. Flood insurance isn't that expensive. The apartments behind me, it's not too bad, or the inspection isn't that serious. You just have to be careful, because that's, you're using emotions to negotiate against your own money. And that's never smart. So sometimes the best real estate deal you make is the one you actually walk away from. So, here's a simple checklist. I do this, and I want you to do this before you buy your next house or an investment. I want you to ask yourself these questions. So what's on the street? What's behind the property? What's being built nearby? What's the flood insurance? Were major renovations permitted and inspected in the property? What does that neighborhood look like at night and on the weekends? What does the neighbors know that I don't know? And would I still want this house if the inside wasn't as beautiful? And who's going to rent this property? Who's going to buy it from me later? What's my exit strategy? Well, is it marketable? Is someone going to purchase it? And probably the most important of all, what problem am I accepting today that I'm going to have to explain to the next buyer tomorrow? And if you can't answer that question comfortably, then you just have to slow down and you just have to reevaluate. So in closing, real estate can create tremendous wealth. I've seen it over and over again. I work a lot of deals. I help a lot of investors. But wealth isn't created simply because you bought a property. It's created because you bought the right property at the right numbers with the right financing, and you had a clear strategy. So don't let the kitchen, sell the house for you. Don't let the interest rate sell the house for you. Don't let the, fear of missing out sell the house. You got to do your homework. Look at what can't be changed, understand the numbers, and know your exit strategy before you even enter it. Because ultimately, you don't make the money when someone hands you the keys. A lot of the times, decisions that determines your profit happen weeks earlier when you decide which property was worth buying in the first place. If you're an investor and you're looking to buy a property now and you're trying to figure out your financing, side of the equation, reach out to me, send me the deal, send me the purchase price, tell me what you're trying to accomplish, and I will help you look at financing options that make sense. So until next time, invest smart, run the numbers, and don't fall in love with the property before you've done your homework. Talk to you soon.